some northern states rejected the 13th Amendment. What up, guys? This is Vice Signal, and let's get into it. The egregious negrophobia in northern states is not the only shameful thing the Yankee written history books tend to minimize about the pre-Civil War era, if not totally ignore. 3 states on Lincoln's side of the Civil War initially rejected ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which is what ended slavery in the United States. These were New Jersey, Delaware, and Kentucky. Delaware rejected an earlier attempt made by Lincoln in 1861 to have the federal government buy its slaves and ship them to Liberia, presumably. In reply to this offer, the state legislator wrote to Lincoln, quote, "When the people of Delaware desire to abolish slavery within her borders, they will do so in their own way, having due regard to strict equity," close quote. Delaware would not ratify the 13th Amendment until 1901, New Jersey in 1866, and Kentucky in 1976. You have to ask yourself, if the Union fought the Civil War to end the great sin of slavery from America, then why would 3 of its states not welcome with open arms an amendment that would end it? It makes you wonder, could it be that maybe they were not fighting to end slavery, but for another reason? I mean, for all their talk of racial enlightenment, the Republicans of the time, Lincoln's party, were more than happy to exclude Chinese immigrants from American politics, as was shown by the Federal Chinese Exclusion Acts first enacted in the early 1860s, which altogether denied Chinese residents citizenship, the right to vote, and put a strict cap on the number of Chinese immigrants that could enter the country. The first act was signed into law by Lincoln himself in 1862. These restrictions caused the Chinese population in the US to drop by scores of thousands in the decades following their enactment, and they were not repealed until 1943. Also, California, which was home to a large number of Chinese immigrants in the US, did not ratify the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, guaranteeing equal protection under the law and the right of US citizens to vote, irrespective of race, until 1959 and 1962, respectively. That was less than 100 years ago, in the 20th century, guys. Between you and I suspect that their ultra-liberal social policies of today are just them overcompensating for their long history of rampant racism. That's white liberal Yankees for you. But anyway, I want you to think about this for a second. Why would Lincoln and the Republicans wage a massive civil war, the bloodiest in American history to this day, allegedly to spread racial enlightenment to the South, then go on to give blacks the right to vote, but not the Chinese? Perhaps it was because the Chinese weren't politically useful to them. You see, the policy of Chinese exclusion attracted whites in California to the Republican Party, which was still new at the time. Lincoln would not have likely won California's votes in the 1860 presidential election if he had ran on a platform of Chinese inclusion. Now, on the other hand, with former white Confederate soldiers barred from voting after the Civil War, the Southern black voting bloc was useful to Lincoln and the Republicans because controlling it would allow them to control Southern state governments and congressional seats. Chinese immigrants, however, were not useful, and so he didn't care about them, just as Lincoln did not care about blacks until they became politically useful to him. For example, in Lincoln's 23 years as a trial lawyer, he never once defended the freedom of a runaway slave, but he did defend a slave owner attempting to reclaim several dozen of them, wealthy Illinois farmer Robert Matson. So just to wrap this up, Lincoln never claimed to care about the rights or dignity of blacks in America until he realized that he could use them to control the South after the Civil War. This is a major reason why the Emancipation Proclamation was not issued until 2 years into the conflict, when Lincoln realized that there could be no peaceful reunification with the South. Otherwise, he would have been perfectly happy sustaining slavery into the 20th century, and there's evidence to support this argument, but more on that later.